Okay, we meet again. Regular hometown cable viewers, don't run away. This is not a rerun, unless you've seen this episode before. But it's July 19th, 2024. My youngest brother turned 65 today, so you know you're getting old when your youngest brother starts getting on Medicare, you know.
Well, I'm 1 year older than the museum that I am affiliated with. It's 79 years old, then you can figure out how old I am.
79, I can't do that. It's higher math.
Okay, all right.
Once you get over my age, I stop counting.
Okay, well, I'd like to too, but unfortunately time moves on.
So, Dick Soper, you're talking about railroads. When we saw you last, we did part 2. Now we're going to do part 1. That's not your fault, though. That's my fault, because I wasn't able to get to your original.
It's not even your fault, because what's happening as museums go along, you never know who's going to walk through the door. And I started this project actually almost a year ago. It started with a photo album, which you're going to see. It's actually a scrapbook. And as I went through the scrapbook, there was all the mysteries that were going through. There were photographs and things there that needed an explanation. So I started looking into all this. And then I thought it would be a good idea to do a talking topic, as well as research on the railroads of Clinton County. So what this led to last fall, a gentleman named Lawrence Duffina of the city of Plattsburgh passed away. His family came to us and offered a collection of railroad books. Now, prior to this, we had 2 books on railroads. One, Shaughnessy's book on the Delaware and Hudson, and we had Shaughnessy's book on the Rutland Railroad. We now have 55 books, which has changed the whole thing considerably. Now, even though I'm retired by a long time, I do not have time to read 55 books. So we do it, we find out something, we research it, then we go to the newspapers, we find out more about it, and that's what this is all about. So it started as, the more I looked into this, I see a map, and then I have to figure out where is this? Where are we talking about? We're talking from 1830 to 1845, and a lot of this isn't here anymore. So what we decided to do, a friend of mine, I ran into a couple of friends who are into high tech, and they've offered to help the museum with this, and me particularly with this project. So now we have a drone. So we can have a map of a certain area, we can look at the map, and then we can fly the drone over the top of the thing and now see what it looks like today. Because a lot of people will say, well, where are you talking about? I don't know where this town is or where this road is. So this is what we are doing now. So we started, the first part was started strictly with research through the books. Now we are flying drones. In fact, tomorrow we're going up to Rouse's Point and we're going up to the Moores train station to do more footage on it. So this has to be processed and then it'll be made into the series. So we're starting from the beginning here. Each one of these locations will start with a number. This is the first of 5. The first one is an overview. Why the Northern Railroad, which was one of the earliest railroads, not the first. 1850. Why it went into place. What was the reason behind it? There were lots of reasons. What were the circumstances that led to it? The other thing, from here, we're going to be visiting 3 museums. We're starting with Rouse's Point, the Rouse's Point train station. We've already shot some footage out around the area. Tomorrow, actually, we're going to go to the Moores train station, which we've been up there before. Again, it's a little hard when you're walking around a bunch of grass. Where were these tracks? What was this all about? And then the next one after this is going to be the Lion Mountain Museum. They're prepared to have us go up there. Same exact situation. We're going to film with a drone. A lot of the interiors of the station, we're going to explain all this. Where were these tracks going? What were they for? The last one we're going to do, the 5th part of the whole thing, will end up being Plattsburgh. We're going to be looking at the Plattsburgh train station as it is now, the way it looked when we first started this whole thing way back in the 1850s. And so that's what this is all about.
We were very lucky. Gordy Little and I got to talk to Mr. Shaughnessy. We went up to Stowe. He spent a few weeks there in the summer, so we went up there and met him and did stories on both his Rutland and D&H book. Do you have the Nimke books too?
I'm not sure what they all are. We've got so many books. Like I said, I haven't got it.
He had many chapters. A lot of it was Vermont because he's concerned about the Rutland mainly. A lot of it's Vermont and a lot of it is on this side of the lake. So he's got but different chapters cover different areas. So the NIMKE, N-I-M-K-E books are really,
I'll have to look when I go
Yeah.
back. I'm pretty sure we have it, because we have a very good comprehensive
yeah, a lot
collection.
of good photos in there. And of
Yeah.
course, Steve Mumley just passed away recently. He was very big with that Rutland history.
Yeah.
And of course, you said the Northern Railroad, 1850, September 28th, as you probably or may not know, 1850, it'd be 175 years next year.
Right.
The first train came through.
Right, exactly. Yes, I do know that. It's part of the presentation
Okay.
here. Yeah.
Yeah, and of course, the former Larry Marnes train station there in Moores. Will you be taking your drone over to show where the D&H came up
We
to?
are, yes.
So you'll be taking
Because
going over
the
Route
freight
11?
station, the freight station is still there. And we're taking the drone over there. Also, we get to Lion Mountain and Plattsburgh, so there's a lot to see.
Yeah,
Once
because
we
where
get to that
the
point.
Route 22 bridge
Right.
goes now, it used to be where the train came into town.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's-
And we
that's
may get to the
important
Shazy
chronicle.
station, but we're not sure yet.
Wow.
It depends on how this all goes.
Yeah, there's a lot to do.
Yeah.
All right, so anything else, Dick? Applaud people who do this stuff and share this, because it's important.
Well, I guess the big point I'm making is that we have lots of books and lots of reference materials at the museum, most of which were donated. And it doesn't do any good in the books unless you bring the story alive, and that's what my job is. One of several people at the museum that do talks like this. And this is what we're trying to do, bring it to the public, get public interest in this. We also are trying to attract people to come to the museum, because all of these series we'll go through, and then we'll be repeating them again probably next fall, next winter we'll do it again.
So you're always looking for more information. If people can add to what you know, you'll be
Right.
welcoming
I'm going to bring that up when we look at this photo, this scrapbook, because people were very nice in writing dates and writing things on the photographs. 'Cause otherwise, we wouldn't have known about it. That's the link to the newspaper articles that we are able to authenticate these things with. Yes.
Yeah, okay. So, but if they want to, they can contact you through the Clinton County Historical Association Museum and.
That's correct.
And, share any information they might have or leads they might have. And
Well, we also have a large library, the research library there, with all these books are in there and available for people. They can't take them out,
Right.
nor can I. But we do research out of these books, and they're welcome to come up and research whatever. We'll try to help them in any way we can.
So they keep a close eye on you when you walk out. every
They
night.
certainly do, yes. Me too, because I want to preserve what we have.
That's right, that's right. Anything else, Dick?
No,
Before we let
that's
you
it
go? All
for
right,
now.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
We're
for
getting
filming
ready
this.
for the history of railroads in Clinton
Okay.
County, part 1.
Okay, thank you folks for coming. There's seats right up here in the front.
She got a seat?
A couple of seats up here in front.
Is that she dropped it?
No, it's fine. I can see what I'm doing here.
Oh, it's fine.
Okay, thank you folks very much for coming. Some of you may have heard some of my talks I gave on the Lozier, topic of the Lozier automobile. This is when I was at the Transportation Museum. I have a little bit of a background in transportation. I was born here in Plattsburgh, as with my family. I worked for a while at Pratt & Whitney Aircraft in Connecticut. I moved after I got out of the Air Force. Spent 4 years, was over in Germany for 3, and I came back to Plattsburgh and I went to work for Pratt & Whitney. I went to college actually for a year, and then I went down to work for Pratt & Whitney building jet engines. Started with regular civilian engines, went to the military engines, the F-100 program. So I was familiar, and I was working in the industry of aircraft to start with. My last job, I retired in 2006 from the Bombardier Corporation building trains. Now my uncle used to live on Miller Street, right where the trains used to cross there on Miller Street. And my aunt and uncle lived at a brick house, very old brick house. And every time the trains would come up, big steam trains would come up the hill, particularly heading north, the whole house would start shaking. This brick house would just, and I'd run outside to see the trains. That's what got me interested in trains. So even though I built trains, I built aircraft, engines, I worked on electrical systems for aircraft themselves, and also I worked at Bombardier for trains. I also love cars. I'm a car enthusiast, and that got me involved with the Transportation Museum and the Lozier cars. But here we are now talking about trains. So one of the things that happens, people make donations to all museums, and ours included. And one of the things they do, they'll bring things in, all kinds of different things. People will come up with a box full of photographs, maybe they donate photo albums, sometimes they're scrapbooks and that kind of thing. And all this is taken very seriously. What we do is we look at the item. There are some things that don't pertain to us. So if you bring us something that has something to do with Detroit and all this stuff, we are the Clinton County Historical Association, so we're obliged to concentrate on things with Clinton County. So what we do, we look at the item. When initially, sometimes things come in. And years ago, we didn't have the staff we have now. Mostly all volunteers. So what we do, we look at the item. We do what we call an accession. It gives you the date that the thing came in. And I'm going to talk about a scrapbook that came in. And this particular scrapbook, what came in 1990. And the only thing they knew about it, they wrote down a little note that it was train wrecks. That was it, an old scrapbook about train wrecks. So they gave it to me. I never had done the accession part of this whole thing, because when I was at the other museum, that was part of my duties over there. So I opened up this scrapbook, and the minute I looked at the first part of the scrapbook, this right here was the first thing I saw in the scrapbook, page 1, opened up. And you see what it says, trains leaving Rouse's Point totaled 107 daily. Now you can see a train going through Plattsburgh, there's 2, one north and one south for a passenger train. And during the night, a few freight trains rumble through. And then it says 27 passenger trains and 80 freight trains, and the date here is 1891. Now this isn't somebody just writing something, this was apparently in the newspaper. Well, I couldn't believe it. The first page, what is this all about? I've been to Rouse's Point. I can't even picture 107 trains. They'd be running almost every minute. So I opened up. I thought this right away. Here I'm not even the first page into this thing. So I set that to one side and I continued on. And I went through, and we're going to get back to this whole topic. This will be on the second section. Now this involves quite a few things. And just to give you an overview right now, I might as well stop right here and tell you, because there's 5 parts, we can only get around to so many places at a time. So this is the whole overview. We're going to talk about railroads. We're going to talk about railroad trains back in the 1800s. We're actually going to start at 1830. We're going to talk about what they look like, how they're operated, what was involved in operating them. Then we're going to talk about the railroad that went through here. We're going to part 2. We've already been to Rouse's Point. I had a couple of friends that are very young, about half my age, that are into high-tech stuff, and they have a drone and some high-tech camera equipment. This happened after we already started part 1 and part 2, so now we went back and we filmed with a drone, because if I show you a map of 18 something or other, and you can picture where this is, well, if you look where the trains used to go, they're all woods now. Hard to see where they are. So now what we're able to do is take a map, fly the drone approximately where the map was, and look down, and this is what it looks like today. You're going to see a little bit of this today. So this is, we're going to open up this album to the second page, okay? Here's page 2, and I open this up. And if you can see in the upper right corner up here, I'll get my pointer going here, somewhere there's a pointer here. Well, you can see up in the upper right corner, Katyville 1900. Okay?
Dick,
Yes.
could you move the screen about 1.5 feet to the right, because all of that glass and light out there is coming through?
Okay. We're going to have to move the projector.
Will it work?
Yeah.
Already better.
Is that okay?
Better, yeah.
Did everybody see? Okay. All right. So we have a few things here. My pointer doesn't seem to work, and maybe I'm not hitting it
We're
right.
also.
What am I doing now? Okay, the second one.
this?
Okay, yep. Sorry about that. New technology. Okay, so here we have, the date is 1900. We have a train wreck. Obviously, this is a siding here. Here's the main track, looks like. And we have the CRR. This is a tender. And because of the design of this, and again, I'm a train enthusiast, this would have been a wood-burning locomotive to start with. Because this is the type of tender they would have used. They would have had to go back in the tender, take the wood out of it, and then water would be running from there to the locomotive. So here's the locomotive on its side, on the left-hand side, and it's sitting here, and it's what they refer to locomotives, they have a set of numbers. They call the first set of numbers are the leading truck, which would be in the front of the locomotive. The next one are the drive wheels, which would be 6 here, and then there's none under the firebox. This is a particular style of locomotive. This would have been 1800s, and this would have been a very early one. Now, we're going to talk about a few other things. One thing we're going to bring up is the subject of narrow gauge versus standard gauge. Now, a narrow gauge railroad is much less expensive to build. The tracks are 3 feet apart. Now, you picture when you get in a train today, can you imagine being on a train that has only 3 feet of distance between it? So we're going to see the difference here later in this thing. But if you take a look, there's a few things that are interesting here. First of all, the front of the locomotive, this is called the smoke box, okay? And it's not there. So how did this locomotive get here where it was? There was nothing to go by this picture, and I moved on to the next picture. Well, we have a gentleman who helps us out, who is a local historian, and he has hundreds and hundreds of photographs of Plattsburgh in this area, and also he has newspaper articles, collections of all these local newspapers. And when the first time he came in, I know what happened right there. I said, okay, maybe you can explain it to me. So what occurred here, this train was in Dannemora. It was being worked on. You look at it, here is a like an open hopper car. That probably would have had iron ore in it, coming from, there were iron mines in Dannemora. There were in also other railroads around, the Chateauguay and so on. So he said, he read me the article. The train was being repaired. That's why the smoke box was off the front of it. It was being repaired in Dannemora. When somebody noticed, started yelling, the train is rolling. Here's a train with several cars and a caboose at the back, and it started rolling down the tracks. Well, they went and ran and jumped onto the train. You can see that there's some places here to get on. There's usually places here where you can climb up onto the train to try to put the brake on to stop this wreck from happening. And this was their livelihood. They didn't want to see this rolling down the hill. Well, it kept on going. And the story, according to the newspaper article, they went from one car to the next car to here, then up to the locomotive, turning brakes on, and it wasn't doing any good. It was still rolling. Okay, so what they ended up doing, they said, there's no way we're going to get this train stopped, so they started going back the other way until they got back to the caboose. They pulled the pin for the train and let the train go, and then they stopped the caboose, because the brake was enough to stop it. This almost sounds like something out of Laurel and Hardy. You know what I mean? An old story. But here's a story, the second page of this scrapbook. Here's an interesting story about what happened here. Now, the other unusual thing here, if you notice the front here, you see there are 3 couplers on the front of it. Now, I won't get into this right now, it's kind of technical, but they used to hook trains together with this loop, a steel loop and a pin. That's how they hooked them together, and the people would have to be in between the trains to put these pins on there. So, why are there 3? Because this is a narrow gauge railroad. Now, down here in Plattsburgh, we finally went to, over a period of time, we went to what they call standard gauge, which is 4 feet, 8.5 inches. Okay? That's what all railroads are today. If you go out and look and measure the tracks, 4 feet, 8.5 inches between the rails. So what would happen is that if this is a narrow gauge locomotive, they had both narrow gauge and standard gauge together. They used one track for the right side of the locomotive, then they had an extra track for the middle that would accommodate the narrow gauge, and then there's the standard one at 4 feet, 8.5 inches. That's why there's 3 couplers on here. So this was an interesting story. It's accounted for in the newspaper, and we finally got an answer to this one. So here's another wreck. This is the 3rd page. And see, we have some information. Wreck number 83, March the 30th, 1918, between Dannemora and Cadyville, caused by a washout, 20 passengers hurt. Engineer W.L. Hammond broke his leg. Okay, so when we looked into this, we found, again, the importance here, we did find the date. We knew exactly where to go to, so we went to the newspaper to find out what went on. This wreck occurred on a place called Gougeville Springs in Cadyville.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you ever went and got water down there. And if you follow the gauge, it's a little hard to see, there's so many woods, but if you follow the ridge all the way up through there, at the very top is where this happened. And I'll show you a few more pictures. You can see this is the passenger train. This is the first of 2 passenger cars. Here is the locomotive, and here's the tender. That's where the water goes in the tender. So that was the washout, and obviously they didn't know what was going on, just coming down Dannemora Mountain, and then all of a sudden, boom, here this goes, and the train derailed. Now, according to the newspaper article, if you go back here, I think it says 20 passengers were hurt, engineer W.L. Hammond broke his leg. Well, this is what they call a camelback locomotive. The reason it's called the camelback, the cab right here is in the center of this locomotive. So the engineer over there would be operating the train, and the fireman is at the back over here. And if you look at the next picture here, the fireman would have been in the very back down in that gully down there. So evidently he jumped. This is where he would have been right here. The fireman would have been on the back of this thing. And this is where it all fell into the gully. So this is the locomotive, this is the tender, and this is the first of the passenger cars. Now, of the 20 people hurt, one woman had just gone into the bathroom, okay, and when she was in there when this wreck occurred. Well, the bathroom actually saved her life because the bathroom was towards the back of this, and she was in an enclosure. They weren't very big, just enough to get in, and it saved her life, okay, from there. So nobody was killed in this wreck. But you see what I mean? 3 pages in, now we have the complete story of what happened with this whole operation here. And we can see a few other photographs here of what this all looked like. And this was a known area of wrecks. This was an issue. Every time it rained, they'd send somebody to check it out. Now this is a painting we have by Emmett Pine. It's in our docent room of our museum, and it is the same locomotive. You can see this is, the locomotive has the engineer here in the center, and in the back here is the fireman. And we're going to talk about this a little bit later when we get to other stuff. So, a poem, okay? A poem here about a train. I'm going to sit for a minute if you don't mind. The poem goes, Poor Bobby. The way this is written, it's a little hard for me to, we don't talk like this normally today, but they're put one over on Bobby after all the work she's done. And now it's time to pension her, just listen just for fun. They're fixed her on a stethoscope or some gall darn device. We don't know what to call it. If we did, 'twould not sound nice. They say there's a squealer and tells of everything. How many times the wheels turn round in the time the bell does ring. If she stays too long at Wilcox or down at the Dock and Coal, that pesky crime detector will knock her for a goal. The boys all think it's shocking to treat an old girl so they're took it up with gompers so that she may get a show. But we guess they got her number after all these long, long years, but poor Bobby's not complaining, it's the crew that's shedding tears. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
This is page 4. So I was entertained just a very short time in this particular book. Then we have this thing. Okay, this wreck occurred in Rouse's Point. This is the Laurentian, the train that would go from Montreal. This date was 1934. You'll see the date here in a minute. In fact, I can check my notes. 1934, February 19th, 1934, and this is the Laurentian. There were 2 trains back in those days. There was the day train and the night train. They would leave from Montreal and New York City. And if you needed to work in Manhattan, you could take the night train at 6 o'clock, and it would arrive the next morning. You'd be arriving in time. They had sleepers and they had diners aboard, and it was a fast train. It didn't stop at all these little stops they do now. So the train has this would be heading north. The locomotive is pointing north. It had just gone past the Rouse's Point station and flopped over on this side. So I started, this is the underside of the locomotive. You can see the brakes here. These are the brake mechanisms here in the center of it. This is a 284 locomotive, and we looked up the information on it. This, by the way, this center photo here is not correct. This is the what we have. This is, go to the side. There's more people coming in, so you can secure. Okay, so this is the picture of it on its side. Then they started the process. This is a big crane that was used to pick the train up. Now, when I got to the newspaper article, it said that the crane here was located right at the Rouse's Point station, and they had, the train was delayed by 1 hour and a half. Come on, you folks, there's folks coming in, they can sit up here. So here, there were 3 turned over. The locomotive rolled over, the tender rolled over, and this is what they call an express car. And the express car was basically the railway post office. So it would haul luggage and the mail would be heading up to Montreal. And you can see it being lifted up by the great big crane here. And it's put on the tracks. And the train, the rest of the train, now whether it was this locomotive, I don't know, but the train left the station an hour and a half later. And again, you stop it, come on in. So this is another amazing story that happened right in Rouse's Point with the train rolling over on its side. And you can see it's quite a large locomotive. They had the equipment right there to do it, and off it went. So these are the pictures. You can tell it was in the wintertime in February 19th, so it was in the middle of a snowstorm. So now we're getting into why did all these trains come here? What was the whole purpose behind trains here in the North Country? The first train was called the Peanut Railroad, which was down from Port Kent to Ausable Chasm area. But we're not talking about that now, and I have very little information. There's another gentleman who wrote a whole book on that. But here we look at the Great Lakes. So one of the issues here, the Great Lakes, you can see Lake Superior here, the largest, I guess that's the largest of the lakes. You see all the rivers and tributaries that come into all these lakes to the Great Lakes. So you have Lake Superior, Lake Michigan, Lake Huron, and down here, this all runs through, down through the city of Detroit, down to Lake Erie. And here it's landlocked. So any boats that are coming through here can't go any further because right over here, right on the, okay, so when we get right over to New York over here, this is Niagara Falls. And you couldn't go over Niagara Falls in a train or in a boat. So that was an issue. So what they did, in 1830, they opened what they call the Welland Canal. And the Welland Canal, this is a picture of the Great Lakes. And I thought this was pretty interesting because if you look at this, it tells a little bit about the lakes. Lake Superior is elevation 801 feet above, or 601 feet above the ocean level. Okay, so it's above, the height above the ocean. Lake Superior is 1,333 feet deep. It goes through St. Mary's River into Lake Huron, which is 577 feet deep, with a depth of 925 feet. Okay, then we get into Lake Erie, which is a large lake, and the elevation there 568 feet. You can see we're going from one to the other to the other. And here's where we get to Niagara. This is why Niagara Falls is so spectacular, because we go from 569 feet to 243 feet. That is the height of Niagara Falls. But the Wellington Canal connected those two. So now that all those river boats with all the products of the Midwest could go into Lake Ontario. And it comes right up to the edge of Lake the western part of Lake New York State. So I'm going to read this is some information that someone handed me. I didn't get a chance to put it into this, so I'm just going to read a few things for you. The Revolutionary War brought settlers to the north for years to come after the war, resulting in a rich and very isolated farm belt, much of it here in Clinton County. We were lacking the means to transport produce to distant markets such as those in the south and west. While roads were less dependable and underdeveloped, we're talking 1830, transportation via waterways in the summer was the most efficient way to reach such markets. But for several months out of the year, the ice impeded travel and the hauling of cargo. It also helps your business. If you have a business of transporting stuff, it stops as soon as the lake freezes, all the lakes. And then it starts again later. It's not a very good way to run a company. What do you do with the employees, okay? Back in 1829, as many in the commerce industry were catching railway fever, something they once had for canals. Those in the north considered a railway running west from Lake Champlain all the way to Ogdensburg. This would allow them to capture commerce in Ontario and other Great Lakes via the Welland Canal, which has just really was just completed. So from Lake Erie, from Lake Ontario, we go from here, it goes up, and then it leaves the United, this is the U.S. here, it leaves the U.S. and then goes straight up into Canada. Okay, so all those products being going are going away from New York State. Now they could, from Lake Erie, they could go south, and they did. There were trains over there in the Midwest. However, you had Boston. Boston was growing fast, and there was a lot of people in Boston that wanted this railway. They wanted a connection through, all the way through to Watertown, which was the last stop of New York State before you get into Canada. So, starting in 1830, meetings were held to promote the vision of the proposed Northern Railway. The Central Vermont Railroad was being constructed at this time, and vested citizens of Montpelier, Vermont believed the Northern Railroad could connect the new road from the east side of Lake Champlain. Those in favor of the plan surmised the trains on this rail would run 15 miles an hour the entire trip from Boston to Ogdensburg, and would take 35 hours to complete. Now again, we're talking a very slow, early train from 1830, not exactly what would be high tech. So again in 1830, a couple other proposals were made. One was a covered railway from Boston to Ogdensburg. Can you imagine a railroad with a roof over the whole thing, all the way from Boston to Ogdensburg? Okay, it's ridiculous. There was another proposal, okay, a canal from Port Kent to Ogdensburg. Now you would have water running through it because Lake Erie was fairly high. Lake Ontario was fairly high, so we'd have plenty of water running through there. But think of having, they were comparing this to to other canals that had been dug at the time. At this time, in 1830, we had 23 miles of railroad in the United States. In other words, the distance from here to Ellenburg. That's all we had in 1830. So plans were originally set for the railway to follow somewhat of a shortcut route starting at Port Kent. This is the original design. Then off to Hopkinton, Parishville, Potsdam, Canton, and lastly to Ogdensburg Terminal. At the engineer's recommendation, the line needed to be constructed on level ground. To avoid mountainous terrain, the new route would begin at Rouse's Point, then to Malone, Stockholm, Raquetteville, Madrid, Lisbon, and then on to the Ogdensburg Terminal. The construction of the Northern Railroad began in March of 1848, taking 18 years after the idea to get it finished. It was completed in 1848. Everyone got to work on either end, so it was built from both ends, Ogdensburg and Rouse's Point. Little by little, tracks were laid at each end, from Centerville, Ellenburg the following year, and then Malone not much long after. On September 20th, 1850, the tracks laid to the west were joined with the east, covering 118-mile stretch of land. In total, it took 3 years to build the Northern Railroad at a cost, think of this, this is 1850, $5,022,131, $121.31. $5 million in 1830. That was a huge thing. Now, the big problem was, we get to Rouse's Point, then what do we do? Okay? So, during this whole construction idea, they were looking at where do we go from here? And people in Boston needed clothing, they needed food, they needed all kinds of products that were available through the Great Lakes. So they were putting pressure on New York State, get this railroad built, finance it, get it done. Well, what did New York State care about what Boston wanted or needed? Except the fact that this was a big retail market for all the businesses involved, for the railroads and for the rest of it. So what we have here, this is the eastern terminus of the original road going up to Rouse's Point. And what you see here, this is Vermont over here, and this is the causeway that's still there now. This is 174 years old, just so you know. This is what's there today. You can still see it when you go across the Rouse's Point Bridge.
That's real?
Yeah.
It's the
So
remnants.
what's that?
Is that the remnants? Of the-
That's what's left of it. Yeah. What they did, they pounded. They had big steam pile drivers that pounded these logs all the way down into until it hit bedrock. all the way across. And I'm gonna show you pictures here of right over in this part over here. Well, I just missed that, but over there, that's where the bridge was. We're gonna see that in a minute. Now, right here, if you take a look, we flew the drone level with, this is a marina on Ross's Point right now. And if you go over see, you're gonna see a parking lot here, and now they store boats that are not in use now. That's where the track ran. You can actually see where it goes right up to there. Tomorrow, we're going to fly a drone above the train station, and we're gonna look the other way. So in part two, when you get to see part two, you'll see from the air, there's nothing to see driving on the roads, because this was 174 years ago. But all this was built 174 years ago. So, now we're gonna talk about these trains. What did they look like, and what were they all about? So this right here is a steam train. This is very similar to the ones I showed you. This is at the, it used to be called Steamtown, USA. It was moved from Vermont. It's now in northern Pennsylvania. I was on vacation a couple weeks ago, and I did go to Pennsylvania, and I went to the Strasburg Railroad. This one right here, all this was closed, so I decided not to go to it, because it was a 2-hour drive from where I was stationed, where I was staying. So this is the train, and here is the other side of the train. It's a complete cutaway, so you can see how these old trains operated. So here is the smoke box I was telling you about. This is where the smokestack is, and we're going to follow this from the point of where the thing was operating. So this is the back of it. This is the main cab here. This is the engineer who runs the train. This is called the fireman, and you can see he goes back in here. He would have had to have wood. He would have had to keep put wood in the front of the cab of the boiler of the locomotive. In later years, now he's shoveling coal. Okay. So right in front here, this is what they call the firebox. This right here is where all the flame is done. They have to start these trains at 4 o'clock in the morning. A fireman comes in, usually he's just a regular employee, he's not necessarily the one that's on the train. He would come in at 4 o'clock in the morning, get the fire going. It has to be ripping and roaring by 6 o'clock when the first train would be ready to leave the station. Okay, so the next thing we look at, this is the side looking from the back. Here you have the drivers, these are where the wheels are. These right here are called the fire tubes, all of these here. So you have a gigantic fire burning in here. The flames, the hot heated gases go all the way through here up to the smoke box in the front. Now you can see why, if that first train I showed you, there's no way it could have been running because there was no front on the thing. The next here will show you, this right here is what the firebox looks like in a little more detail. Now, right above the firebox, this is basically an inferno if you were looking at it. This right here is what they call the crown shield. This is where there was water in here, and there's water all down the outside of those tubes. Right above it, there's a place for the steam to get out. That's the generator that ran the electric light on the front of the locomotive. Now, they usually didn't have enough electricity to run the whole train, so what they did is they would have oil lights down the rest of the passenger section of the train. But in freight trains, all you need, so this is an electric generator that runs the big light in the front and also in the cab of the train. Here's a picture of the steam dome. So when the water is boiling in here, surrounding this jacket here is boiling water, and the steam comes up here, and this is where the steam goes in to operate the whole entire locomotive. Now, when a train, you can see up here the steam, the water covering all of these tubes, fire going through these tubes here, and you see these other dome things up here. Well, what this is, trains are an iron wheel on the train, working on an iron rail underneath the train, okay? And to get it going when it's pouring rain or in the snow, you need traction. Now, if you have a modern car today, you have traction control. You might not even know you have it. You go to take off, all of a sudden it kind of feathers the throttle to give you traction. They had these back in the 1800s for trains. This is the smoke box in the front. This is what was missing on that particular train. And you can see here what happens, all those heat from the firebox comes into this area. The steam gathers up in the dome here. It comes forward on this big tube. They got it cut out in a way, but this goes into this here, and it goes down to the pistons that drive the train. This is the piston on the train. I know it's a little complicated, but this is a cutaway. So the steam comes in. This thing goes back and forth. That's the valve. And then the steam comes in here and pushes back on this, and then it reverses on the other side. So that's what causes the two drivers to go on, they're opposite each other on the opposite sides of the train. This is the tender in the back. So you have here, this is where all the water is here. And this is, water's in the upper part here, the lower part here, and the coal is up in the upper part. So there's a divider between the two to keep them separated. Now, it requires, if you take a certain volume, so many feet of coal, it takes 8 times the amount of water to go the same exact distance. So if you run out of coal, you run out of water 8 times. So they had to have a lot of water stations along the way to keep these locomotives ready to go. If you want to operate the locomotive, well, I have to give you a manual, because this is what it looks like inside the cab of this same locomotive. And you see over here, this is the engineer who runs the train, and over here is the fireman. And this is the firebox here, that's what they see. So what the fireman would do, in this case it would be, he would be shoveling coal in there. What he does, he steps on a pedal here, and these 2 doors flip open. Every time he comes up to it, he steps on there, throws in the shovel of coal, goes back and gets another one. And it's his responsibility to keep the pressure up, which is usually 200 to even 300 pounds per square inch, and keep the water temperature at a certain temperature, and keep the cold water coming from the tender in. That's his job over on this side. And that's what he does with all these little wheels and valves. There's his gauges that he has to watch. Now, the other thing is, the way these old trains were designed, the engineer can only see down the right side of the train. He can't see anything going on the other side. So he had to depend on his coal fireman to let him know if there's something going on. Now, so what happened, the engineer on the right-hand side has to watch out on the side for this W. There would be a W. What's that is? The whistle, because you have a crossing coming up. Okay, and might be a number after the crossing that would let him know how many blasts he would go. It's usually 1, and then 1, 2, and then 1. That's normally what they used to do back in the old days. So it took quite a bit to learn how to do this. Okay, we've got some pictures here of the main narrow gauge railroad. A friend of mine, Bill Crosby, I mean, some of you might know him. He's my next door neighbor, and he is a train enthusiast. He's also a photographer, and he went and got these pictures of the main narrow gauge. He belongs to this group, the main narrow gauge railroad, and we're going to see some pictures that he took and provided to me. So this is their narrow gauge locomotive, and you can see here how narrow it is. This is a 3-foot gauge, so it's 3 feet wide. And you can see the width of the train versus, look at where the wheels are, way down inside here. So this is a conventional steam locomotive, just like the one, similar to the one we saw, except it's a little bit smaller. And this is this train in operating with the steam coming out of it. This here is the steam train in operation, and you see here we have a total of, there's actually a total of 4 cars here. The first one is what they call a combination car. That has luggage in the front, and then passengers from their back. We have a picture of it. This over here would be another passenger car, and then this over here is a first class car. And then in the very back we have the caboose. Now most passenger trains don't have a caboose. The freight trains do, because there are 4 people running the train. You have the engineer on the right side in the front, you have the brakeman on the left side, you also have what they call, the fireman on the left side, you have the brakeman back in the caboose, and then you have the conductor, who's the one that's responsible. He's the boss of the train. He says when the train can go. So there are 4 people that operate these trains. So this is an example. This locomotive is a diesel, because they do run tours of this. And these steam trains are very, very high maintenance when it comes to working them. So you can see the beauty here. This is a narrow gauge. You see the arched windows. The windows do open and close. Look at how fancy the roof is in the back and all these curves done on it. And this is way back. This would have been, these right here would have operated, I believe, near Wiscasset, Maine, on the narrow gauge. So they're very narrow. We're going to see the inside of one. So this is, if you look at the details here, it's amazing. This is called what they would call the clear story. They can open these windows in the summer so the heat would come out as they ride. There's a wood stove in there, and there's a bathroom in every car. This right here is called the vestibule on the train, and this is how you get in the train right here. So this is the interior of the vestibule, looking up at the top of it here. You can see all the wood. This is a wood passenger car, all constructed by hand of wood. And you see all the curves and stuff here. Beautiful details done here to make this. And again, the craftsmanship they had back in the day is amazing. And you're going to be even more amazed when we get to the rest of it. This is Bill Crosby, my neighbor. He's a photographer. And he took this really neat picture of that train as the sun was setting. So he's very creative when it comes to his photography. And that's this is one of his pictures here. This is the interior of the one with the clear story. This is the upper section here. Plenty of room to walk. This is quite high up here. And you can see all the wood, beautiful wood all trimmed in here. These are the oil lamps that would be in here. And you notice there's one seat on either side. Whereas most trains now have at least four, if not even more than that. The ones we built at Bombardier had 3 on one side, 2 on the other. So it was 5 o'clock plus the aisle. This next one shows from the interior. This right here is what we call the observation car, and it's a deluxe car. And again, look at all the beautiful mahogany inside here. The window shades have, I don't know what you call that, frills, I guess, on it to pull them down. This is the interior of that car, and then notice again, this one right here has all velvet upholstery with cloth above it, and you can turn the seat and look out the window side, right out sideways. So as you go along, you can see all the scenery as you're going along through the train. Okay, this is another view in that, and you can see the details. Everything here is brass. These are the luggage racks above you. Now they could take your luggage. If you have a lot of luggage, they put it in the baggage car or the combination car. And if you have your own personal stuff you want to keep with you, you just set it up there. This is similar to modern trains today, except they're not made out of brass today. And you're not sitting in velvet seats, I'll tell you right now. You're sitting in very commercial type seats. So this is the combination car with the baggage. This would be the baggage end of the car right here. And then you have the seats in the back. So this is a combination car. Now this is the caboose. Now these cabooses here could be used on a freight train in a small town. So if you had a small run, let's say trains that might go from Plattsburgh to Los Forks. Okay, they're not very big. So you might have some box cars going there, and then hooked to the back would be this combination caboose. This is what it looks like. So the caboose here, you can see this is the cupola on the top of it. And on the top, the brakeman would go up there, and also the conductor, because he can keep track of where the train is. He knows where the stations are, where the stops are, what has to be done to the train. The brakeman would come out and switch the tracks that they had to back up. And so this is the passenger section, this is the freight, and this is where the crew would stay back here. Now this right here is, if you go to the Adirondack Museum, this is a car that I love. This is something to see. If you go to the museum, this is worth the whole trip. This is a steel train that would have been built somewhere in the 1930s, probably 1920s to 1940. And this is a private rail car. So if you're, like today, if you had a private jet you're flying around in, this would be what you would be the equivalent of that, okay? So this is made out of steel. These are approximately 40 feet long. And you go into the car from the back. This is, you would enter right here. You go in the back. This is like your back porch. If you want to, you could ride out there in the back. However, a lot of these were steam trains, and you might have steam coming or smoke coming from time to the back. So not a lot of people would sit out there. But you could go to a location and have this car dropped off, and you could stay here for some length of time in this car. They would have to accommodate you for electricity and so on. So this is the view from the back porch, we'll call it, or the entry vestibule. And we have a few things here that are kind of interesting. First of all, you have right here, that's the emergency brake. Why do you need it for this car? Because if you're a millionaire, you'd want your car delivered to a certain place. Maybe it's up in a beautiful place in Maine, someplace where you're with a nice view. You drop it off there, and that's how it sets the brake. This over here, if the whole train was backing up, that's a whistle. So that whoever's back here guiding the train can blow the whistle as it goes across a crossing, or to alert people that might be in the way of them. This is the brake, close up the brake. You notice that it's all brass trim, and then wrought iron down here. This is the whistle. So this is the whistle they would use to warn anybody once the train was backing up and had to be backed up. This is the interior of the living room. Look at the beautiful details here. These right here are the vents for, some of these cars had air conditioning. Some of the ones in the late 30s would be equipped with air conditioning, also heat. And this is set up just like you would love to have if you're a millionaire and you had a beautiful home. Look at all the things, and these are all available to you. Look at the curtains. Okay, places to hang your coat if you want. This is another picture, carpeting on the floor. Everything is fully carpeted, very quiet in there. And these were very well insulated. They were very quiet when you're traveling in them. This is the hallway, which leads towards the back part of the train. This is how you go into the back. A lot of European trains are this way. If you go to Europe, usually you have individual cabins you sit in, and that's how you get towards the back of the train. Back of this particular car. You can see they've got a rudder to protect the carpet because this has been beautifully restored. I went in the train when I was at Strasbourg Railroad. We went on the dining car. It was from 1870 it was built, and it was restored. And the one train, it wasn't a big one like this. This one was just a diner, and it cost them $250,000 to restore that dining car. You can see here, this is the bathroom as you go in. This is the shower. This is the bed, double bed in there, so this would be the private, I guess you call this the master bedroom. This is the washroom of the second bedroom. It's a smaller one. These right here are out of order, Helen. I guess we got on the wrong tracks here, but anyway, this is the dining room. And you can see the chairs here around. This can seat actually 8 people. Could be in this area here. And again, you got the same thing. All of them have the coat hooks up here. They have this fancy wood trim. There's also a little bit of a library in here. And this is an additional area where additional people could be seated. You could seat another probably 8 people back here, 2 on each side. And you can see this is the back end of this particular car. And beautiful, just gorgeous details. Again, you have a fan here to circulate air a little bit. This is the second bedroom. This is a single bed. There might have been another one to pull down in there. So this could accommodate someone else. Now, this is that other second area. I got a little closer look here. And you can see the beautiful details here. This is the bottom of the bed that folds down. So that would be the second bed. So if you had kids, you could probably see 2 kids. You could sleep 2 kids up here and maybe 2 down here. So a whole family could ride together in this particular car here. This is the library. Okay, so you could do reading material. Now keep in mind, this was probably belonging to one individual family. These were typically owned by some of the very wealthiest people of the time. So all their stuff would be in here. The next thing here, this is another one of the chairs. And here's the kitchen. All stainless appliances in here. This is where they would have a chef would be on board, and you would also have what they call the porter. A porter would also be on board here. You can see a 6-burner range, and then the oven here. And again, they're not cooking for a whole train, just for the family. This is right outside. This is the water tank. It's a pressure tank over here that contains the water, and you see the water pressure. Over on this side over here is the water heater. So that provided hot water for the whole train. And this is where the crew would, the 2 people during the night, once the people were fed and everybody got where they were going. This is the lower part right here where one person could sleep here, and then you had the fold down bunk on the top of this. This is the end of the train. You come out the back, so this is where these pull down beds are in this area over here, and this is the back exit of this. People asked me before, what's this all about? That is, if they have to do maintenance on the roof, once it's at the station, they put a ladder and hooks it up so they can get up to do maintenance on the train. So I thank you folks very much for coming. We appreciate you. We are going to be, there are 4 more sections to this. Again, we're flying the drone tomorrow off of Ross's Point. We're going into the station. Next, we're going to Moores, probably in the afternoon. I've already got some photographs we took there. Then we're going to Lion Mountain. We're going to explore the mines and where all the tracks went around there. Then we're finally coming down here to Plattsburgh, and that's our last mission. Probably that'll occur towards the fall. So be patient for 3, 4, and 5, if you will. 2, 3, 4, and 5 as we go along this journey we're taking. And thank you very much for coming. Oh, by the way, you saw these big locomotives? I brought a section of track for you. You see these 200 and 300 up to 500,000 pound locomotives? This is what they're running on. If you go down to the tracks here on Boynton Avenue, this is what the train is sitting on. That's less than ½ an inch across. You can pass it around if you want to check it out. A 4-foot section of this would weigh 60 pounds. And picture these big, any of you know the 401 Ford Big Boy, which was built by the American Locomotive Company in Schenectady. That's what it runs over. That's the track it runs over.
I was built there.
Yes, it was alcohol. Schenectady, are you from Schenectady?
Well, yeah, it's changed now.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's all gone. All been torn down.
Tear it down.
That'll wrap up this presentation. Dick Soper and the Clinton County Historical Association Museum. Thanks for watching.